Hi everyone, this is Jason Reynolds. Thank you for joining us today. My podcast is called Followers of the Cross. I will be talking with Christian authors, musicians, and others who are involved in Christian media and ministry. I hope that you come away learning a little bit about new albums, books, and more. I also hope you learn a little bit about the people who make them. I've worked in newspapers for almost 20 years. I currently write for a newspaper in Tennessee and write blogs on the side. All of this gives me a chance to interview fascinating people. Check out my blogs sometime, please. followersofthecross.com and TennesseeChristianNews.com. My Twitter accounts are followerscross and TN Christian News. And now to the program. Hi everyone, this is Jason Reynolds. Thank you for joining us today. My podcast is called Followers of the Cross. I will be talking with Christian authors, musicians, and others who are involved in Christian media and ministry. I hope that you come away learning a little bit about new albums, books, and more. I also hope you learn a little bit about the people who make them. I've worked in newspapers for almost 20 years. I currently write for a newspaper in Tennessee and write blogs on the side. All of this gives me a chance to interview fascinating people. Check out my blogs sometime, please. followersofthecross.com and TennesseeChristianNews.com. My Twitter accounts are followerscross and TN Christian News. And now to the program.
Today I'm speaking with Ann White. Ann is the founder of In Grace Ministries and host of the Christian talk show Atlanta Live. She is a wife, a mother, and a grandmother, and she is pursuing a master's degree at Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary. Ann is an author, and today we're talking about her new book as well as any other topics that she is wanting to talk about. Hello, Ann.
Hi, Jason. How are you today?
Good. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So I said a lot about you just then, but of course no one knows you like you know yourself. Would you like to say about yourself or any other details about what it is that you're doing in your ministry?
Well, I began this journey with the Lord at 19 years old, and like so many of us as Christians, that walk can begin very slowly, and for some people it happens, there's a quicker transformation and they dive in quicker, but at 19 I just, gradually meandered. I gave my heart to the Lord and knew I was changed, but didn't really begin to truly transform until about 15 years ago as I began to study God's Word, and then that Word began to sink into my heart and began to really transform me and began to bring me to a point in my life where I realized there were some things about myself and the way that I handled things, the way that I dealt with certain life situations that really needed to change. And so that's really where the book all came about. But yes, I'm a wife of 30 years this October and mother of two boys who are both grown, and one has a family with two grandchildren, a 7-year-old granddaughter and a almost 2-year-old grandson. And so we're very blessed. It has not been a smooth ride as it is for, a lot of us. So, but it's been a wonderful ride, and God always works everything, even the good, the bad, and the ugly. He works everything for good, and He has a purpose in mind if we'll just surrender to His plan. And that's kind of what brought me, full circle these last 4 years, and then ultimately led me to write the book, 7 Steps to Courage.
Awesome. And to me, the giving yourself over to God and letting it be His plan, would you say that's one of the hardest parts of being a Christian? I mean, certainly that is for me.
Oh, it absolutely is. I think there's a couple things that as Christians that we do. We like to control. We like to think we've got things under control, and letting go of that control and just letting God and surrendering it all over to Him is one of the toughest things to do. The other thing to do is to just be real. And I think as Christians, sometimes we often put on a mask of perfection or put on a mask of everything's okay because we think that if we let the world know, or even our closest friends know what's really going on in our life behind closed doors or in our hearts, that they wouldn't understand, they might not accept us, they might judge us. And so I think the second most hardest thing for a Christian to do is just to be transparent and be real, because we're all in that same situation. You know, and as I was walking in for years into a church that we'd been at for 23 years and walking in as though everything was just fine while it was crumbling in the background, there were so many other people that were doing the exact same thing. And until we get real with one another, and it just doesn't break down those walls, it allows Satan to keep us in isolation.
True. Well, speaking of that, and speaking of life crumbling, talk a little bit more about that and what that looked like in your life. I'm assuming that's sort of tied into some of the message that you share in your platforms.
It absolutely is, and that's where courage came to be. You know, the first step in exercising true courage is being honest with ourselves and then making a commitment to change those things in our life that need to be changed. And so in May of 2012, while I was on a trip to Israel with our oldest son, it was a church trip, I got to a point where God really brought me to my knees. My marriage was on life support. My husband and I were having discussions even while I was in Israel as to how we were going to end our marriage. And in 7 Steps to Courage in the book, I tell the story of that point that I got to, where God brought me to my knees. And at that very moment, when I was in my hotel room looking over the Sea of Galilee, and I knew that my marriage was over, I broke down and just cried out to the Lord and said, God, what do I do now? Because I think the saddest thing about it, Jason, was that no one knew. I was a teacher at church. I actually, helped run a department of the in-depth study of God's Word. And so I knew God's Word, and I taught God's Word, and I could tell everybody else how to handle, what God's Word had to say about their situations. But I got to that breaking point, and I just didn't know what to do. And as I cried out to the Lord, He gave me exactly what I needed, and that was the courage for the first time in my life to reach out and be honest about what was going on in my life and ask for help.
That had to be a really humbling experience.
Very much so, very much so. But it was the experience that set me on a course that I began to learn how to heal myself and the broken pieces of my life that really stemmed all the way back to my childhood, where I had developed belief systems about myself and unhealthy habits and unhealthy coping skills and, all of those things that we kind of carry that baggage along with us through life. And if we don't learn how to unload it and heal those broken pieces, we'll continue to carry them, and they'll continue to damage relationships and our circumstances, our situations, our decision-making. And, the bottom line is I learned one of the most important lessons of my life was that in order to trust God, I had to let go of my fear. And that was just one of those things that was really hard for me, because I'd grown up with this sense of operating out of fear, fear of someone's anger, fear of disappointment, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, all of those things that kind of track along and are in the corners of your mind, and they affect your decision-making as you go through life.
Yeah, they certainly do, and you just live in a state of constant, like, what's next, sort of.
Yeah, you tend to react more than act, and I talk about that in 7 Steps to Courage. So 7 Steps to Courage is a book that came out of this experience, and I'll be honest with you, Jason, I never had an intention to write. I never desired to write anything. But as God began to draw me closer, and as I began to work with a Christian counselor who's a pastor, who's now my husband and I, he's our life coach, he's just a great friend. But as I began to peel back those layers and uncover, I began journaling as really an exercise, a healing exercise. And the more I journaled, the more I wrote down, the more it became evident the steps that I was going through to heal my brokenness and to really give me courage. And as I looked at it, I thought, these steps are steps that anyone can use when they're in a place in their life where they need the courage to make a change. It could be courage facing life after the loss of a loved one, or facing dating after a divorce, or starting a new career. There's so many things that we in life need courage for, even if it's just to stand up for our faith. But so it just kind of boiled down to these 7 steps, and as I began to, God began to birth this book in my heart and in my mind, and I began to write. He then put these 7 steps in order, and as I looked at it, it became an acrostic for the word courage. And so the word courage, for each letter of the word courage, there's a particular step that we can walk through, and that's what I outline in the 7 steps to courage. Each chapter covers that, each step that you need to go through to build your courage muscles and move forward in freedom, which is how I end the book.
Okay. And who should buy this book? I mean, of course, you'd love for everyone to buy it, but who is this most ideal for?
This can be for couples, it can be for husbands, it can be for wives, it can be for teens, it can be for young people who are, it's not a marriage book, it's a life book. It can be for any age, honestly, because we like I said, we all have areas in our life where we need to exercise our courage muscles. So let me go over the courage steps, and you'll see how practical it is, and then we kind of get in and how it would apply really to anyone. And I get messages on Facebook. We have our Facebook page, which is 7 Steps to Courage, and we also have 7stepstocourage.com, where I receive a lot of comments from people who've read the book and who've said, this came at the right time. I really needed this to challenge myself. So I'll go over those courage steps. The C step is commit to change. And, now that's the first step that we have to come to. Until we're ready to commit to making a change in our life, God really can't take us any further. When we're ready to let go of that brokenness or those issues or that bad attitude or whatever it is, we've got to commit to making a change. And so I spend the whole chapter talking about what are the things and helping readers identify what are the things in your life that you need to commit to change. Is it unforgiveness? Is it bitterness? Is it an attitude? Is it, a situation, a circumstance? Could it be abuse? There's all sorts of things. And then the O step in courage is overcome obstacles, because there are so many obstacles in our life. They might be situational, they might be relational, they might be personal, and we identify those obstacles, and then we begin to pray about them, and we begin to figure out particular steps of how we can begin to overcome them. The U step in courage is uncover our true self. And, that's a biggie, because so many of us have distorted beliefs about ourselves. Many of us suffer with self-condemnation or shame or insecurities. And until we embrace who God really created us to be, then we can continue to move forward. The R step is replace worldly lies with scriptural truth. And that, again, is where children, we begin to take on belief systems as we grow. And some of them are sound and solid, and yet some of them are often not so sound and solid. And we need to compare them to what God's Word has to say and see if we're toting around some worldly lies that are unhealthy and are causing us some issues. The A is accept the things we cannot change, and I'm sure, Jason, you can, that's a difficult one for all of us. It was probably the hardest one for me, because I always want to change other people.
Yeah.
But I got to accept, I can't change somebody else. I can only change one person, and that's myself, and let God do the rest of the changing. And so it's accepting some of the things in our life that we can't change. Then the G is grasping God's love for us and really embracing that. And then the E is embrace a life of grace. And that's why my ministry is In Grace Ministries, because those years that I went through these healing from 2012 till today, God encouraged me to birth a ministry which is an outreach, and I speak and do mission trips and so forth, and speak into the lives of men, women, and children, teens,